It's time for the 1430 Connection on 1430 WNAV and 99.9 FM, spotlighting news, newsmakers, and important community issues. Now, with this week's edition of the 1430 Connection, here is WNAV news anchor Donna Cole.
Welcome to the 1430 Connection. My name's Donna Cole. I'm in the studio today with Glenn Fueston. He's the Executive Director of the Governor's Office of Crime Control and Prevention. Thank you for joining me today.
Oh, thank you for having us, Donna.
First, give a summary of what the Governor's Office of Crime Control and Prevention is all about. How old is this office?
Certainly. So the office has been around for over 50 years, actually, in different forms and different iterations throughout the different administrations. What our job is we serve several primary roles. Governor Hogan has changed it a bit. Primarily, we're a grant-making agency, so we administer grant funds for criminal justice throughout the state. We do administer about $170 million a year. We go beyond the grant funds, though, and we're helping to support programming across law enforcement, victim services, and prevention.
Your background in law enforcement?
My background is law enforcement and intelligence, yep.
Tell me about that.
So I worked for a program called the HIDTA program, High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area, for about 20 years. I ran Intel, did all the data and big data analysis.
We're smiling because I said prior to this starting is that Glenn seems like a data guy.
I'm a geek. You can call me a geek.
Why is that so important? Why are numbers and reports so important?
You know, the thing that I like about data and information, you hear it a lot in the private industry and businesses, that people are making better decisions, stronger decisions, more efficient decisions with data, and they're bringing a bottom line increase to for-profit organizations. I think that we can do the same thing in government, but the profit would be better services for people, getting more people into services, stopping crime, and doing the like.
One of the things you often hear people say is another report, another committee to study what we already know is a problem. What's your feeling about that? Can there be a time where you say enough is enough? We know what we need. Go ahead.
Certainly. I think that it's important to bring together subject matter experts. Data can tell you so much, but you have to bring together the experts that know the ins and outs of the information. That said, I think a lot of times those committees come together and they use anecdotal information where we could be looking at hard data and have more real-time access to that. Data-driven decision-making is a real key for us so that we can use that data to make a stronger decision faster, then talk to the experts and work with the experts to make sure we're implementing it correctly.
And how did you come onto this decision? Did you raise your hand one too many times? Did the governor say, I need Glenn? Glenn is the guy.
That's right.
Tell me.
The governor did reach out. We did some work when I was at the federal level doing the high intensity drug trafficking area, and they reached out and said that they wanted someone to help with the data-driven decision making and make more efficient decisions with the taxpayers' dollars. You know, we manage a lot of money for the taxpayers, and we want to make sure we're doing the best job we can.
$170 million. Yep. Where has that gone?
It's gone all over the state. You know, we utilize data, again, to try to help us look at the crime rates and where crimes are occurring, where victims are, and where we need to focus our prevention efforts to make sure that we're funding programs in the right places.
Now, I know that some new cyber developments have taken place in the wake of Baltimore. Mm-hmm. Is that part of your office?
It's not. So we are out of the cyber world. That's more the Department of Information Technology.
That's where it gets really geeky.
Yes, very geeky. Those are the severe geeks in the Homeland Security Department.
All right. Yep. But that will be affecting your office and every other Maryland state office as time goes by.
Certainly. You know, some of the things that we're looking at is on the cyber side of the house is like identity theft. You know, how can we work with individuals to make sure that their IDs aren't getting stolen? We see a lot in the elder community sometimes where people are getting their IDs stolen, or they're just being victimized by scams.
Okay, grants with $170 million. Tell me where some of those have gone. Programs.
So some of the programs that we fund, some of the ones that we're most excited about is the Maryland Criminal Intelligence Network. So this is a enforcement initiative that's all throughout the state. There's 13 sites, 2 in Anne Arundel County. There's 1 in Anne Arundel County and 1 in Annapolis. And what we're doing is we're working with law enforcement agencies to bring together different enforcement entities to share information, collaborate in order to identify the worst of the worst violent criminal networks, human trafficking networks, firearm trafficking, drug trafficking, and gangs.
And was this information that was learned at the federal level and state and local in the wake of 9/11 that is now coming down?
Certainly. It's information that I brought with me from our federal programs to bring on collaboration. But I think you'll see in the governor's messaging a lot, it's about collaboration. It's about working together. How can we work together to make better decisions and better outcomes for our people in the state?
And we've seen the success of this particular program with some people locked up in the drug world in most recent history.
We certainly have. Some of the things that we're most proud of, we just did an investigation in the Harbor House and Robinwood communities in Annapolis, where we were able to seize over $50,000 of illegal drugs. Sometimes people don't really see the connection here in Annapolis. They think that it's Annapolis and we're secluded. There's other investigations that we've worked with Baltimore City Police, for example. Baltimore City has alerted Anne Arundel County Police about a drug trafficking ring where they were bringing drugs up into the city and causing harm. Just in this program, we've identified 46 of these violent criminal networks that are operating in Anne Arundel County and Annapolis, and our investigative teams are investigating them now.
And we have listeners, quite a few listeners on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. I've seen some of this work extend over to Queen Anne's County and beyond.
100%. We have MSIN sites over on the Eastern Shore. Matter of fact, we have 2 sites on the Eastern Shore, and they're being just as productive. And they're working, again, across the MSIN sites, which is something we're very interested in, is this collaboration between the MSIN sites, between law enforcement, and reaching out to other states. So on the Eastern Shore, for example, we work regularly with Delaware State Police and with Philadelphia to stem the flow of drugs.
And we'll explain why that's important. We're going to take a short break. This is Donna Cole on the 1430 Connection. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the 1430 Connection. I'm Donna Cole. In the studio with me today is Glenn Fueston. He is the Executive Director of the Governor's Office of Crime Control and Prevention. One of his big initiatives is getting law enforcement to communicate, whether it's local, state, or federal, because that communication is important. Drugs move from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Guns move from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Those criminals that are operating in Wilmington, Delaware, which, by the way, is a big area for
drugs and gangs and human trafficking,
then come over across the state line into Queen Anne's County, into Anne Arundel, up into Baltimore. Yeah, they don't stay put, right?
They certainly don't. And that's one thing that we have to remember is although we have these nice, clean lines of jurisdictions, the bad guys out there, they don't care about those jurisdictional lines. And the more we work together, the better we're going to be.
Human trafficking is a big problem. I recently had 2 detectives in from the Anne Arundel County Police Department, and to hear these stories, it's horrific.
It is. It's horrible to think about that. And a lot of times when people think about human trafficking, they think about overseas trafficking of women and children and men as well. But I tell you, sometimes it happens right here in our local communities, and it's happening more and more in our local communities where they're finding young, vulnerable kids and trafficking them for labor. They're trafficking for sex purposes and the like.
Okay, so back to the $170 million. We talked about 2 of the programs. Let's hear some others where this money is going.
Certainly. With our office, we're taking this multidisciplinary approach. We don't want to focus just on the enforcement side of the house because we feel that the disciplines have to work together as well. So it's all about collaboration. So we're doing enforcement, prevention, and victim services. So in the prevention world, some of the work that we're doing is a program called Handle with Care. Handle with Care is a program, it's a collaboration between schools and law enforcement. Again, getting people to talk. And it's a very simple program, but very impactful. We're asking law enforcement when they go onto the scene of any incident and they've seen a child that is exposed to trauma, just within 24 hours to contact the school and just simply say that this child was exposed to trauma, you should handle them with care.
Now, as a parent, I'm thinking, what kind of trauma and what kind of scene? Because there are so many different things that could affect children.
Certainly. So it could be anything, and it's really up to the discretion of the law enforcement officer. That's why we offer training in that, so the experience. But we're looking at drug overdoses. So did their parents overdose on fentanyl? Mm-hmm. And did they experience that? Is it a child abuse situation? Is it a domestic violence situation? Is it a homicide? homicide? Is it any type of incident where a law enforcement officer is called out?
So I'm going to read some stuff that was on your website. It says a recent survey of the incidence and prevalence of children's exposure to violence and trauma revealed that 60% of American children have been exposed to violence, crime, or abuse. 40% were direct victims of 2 or more violent acts. Prolonged exposure to violence and trauma can seriously undermine children's ability to focus, behave appropriately, and learn in school. It often leads to school failure, truancy, suspension or expulsion, dropping out, or involvement in the juvenile justice system. Kids are seeing parents, maybe friends, locked up.
Mm-hmm.
Are the officers going to those kids that are just out on the street watching this?
100%. You know, whenever they have that opportunity to interact with a child, they are. They're finding these children and then referring them back to the school. And what you were describing about the interaction with violence and exposure to trauma is 100%. It's a bigger picture what we're working on. There's a theory out there called adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, and there's 11 different measures, one of which is violent crime, but others are, incarcerated parents, alcoholism, and the like. And these 11 different indicators have helped us identify, again, it's using data to identify those children that may have a reduced quality of life or less well-being in their life. So we want to focus on those children to make sure that we can bolster them wherever we can.
Is every police officer trained in this?
We're training everybody. So I can't say everybody is right now, but we are certainly working towards that. In Anne Arundel County, we've already had 112 different notices sent out that has affected about 116 different children. So,
notices of children that were experiencing trauma that went to schools, and the schools then get a notice of, is there any privacy here for the...
Yeah, so that's a very good point. So when we make these when the law enforcement makes a telephone call, they're not sharing any personally identifying information other than the first name of the student and simply saying, handle them with care. So
the school counselor gets the name of Becky.
Right, yeah.
How do they know which Becky?
Yeah, so they have to work through that. So it's usually a telephone call or an email. And then the law enforcement officer will have to work with that counselor to identify which Becky it is to get to that detail. But the point there is we're not sharing the detail of the incident about the child. So we're not exposing that child to the counselor. What we're hoping, though, is that the school now will be alerted. So if Becky doesn't bring her homework in, or if Becky shows up a little bit late, that the school will say, well, Becky needs to be handled with care, and maybe let's bring her in to talk to the counselor. Let's see what's going on, and hopefully initiate that conversation.
And when did this start?
This started back in the fall of 2017, I believe, and that's when the governor started moving it forward.
Let's talk more about this, because we're both parents.
Yes.
We'll be right back on the 1430 Connection. Welcome back to the 1430 Connection. I'm Donna Cole. In the studio with me is Glenn Fueston. He's the Executive Director of the Governor's Office of Crime Control and Prevention. We're talking about this program, Handle with Care. We're both parents. Our children are our future.
100%.
And it's interesting that, one, this helps to make sure they're okay, the children that have been exposed to trauma. But it also is a preventative measure because, as we've seen with many of these active shooter situations, it's kids that grew up with issues.
Certainly. Yeah, I mean, I think if you look back at a lot of these scenarios and we look in history, we can see different incidents leading up to those types of active shooting situations. And, the more that we can get involved with children and talk with those children and work with those children, I think it is a preventive measure. That for the violent crime, but also for drugs and for other violent exposures for healthy relationships in the future.
Our listener area is Anne Arundel and Queen Anne's counties, but again, the criminals move across borders, and we're not far from Baltimore City. Mm-hmm. How do we fix Baltimore City?
Wow.
And by we, I don't mean me, I mean you. How do you fix Baltimore City?
Well, I think that the approach that we're taking is collaboration. We're working, again, again, across disciplines, but we're also not focusing just on enforcement. The governor has taken a strong line, and we all agree that we have to get violent repeat offenders off the street. There are violent repeat offenders that are causing harm in the city of Baltimore and around the community. So we have to get them off the street. But we also have to focus on preventing new criminals from coming aboard. We also have to look at the victims. A lot of times victim services have left out, and we really put a focus on increasing the safety, self-sufficiency, and knowledge of our victims to make sure that they can move forward and re-engage with society.
But when you have a city that's been so hurt by violence, and then hurt by political issues, and then hurt by issues within the police department, how do you? This is a huge problem. How do you? You're the guy. You're the office.
Yes.
Yeah. This is you.
Yep, and I think what we're looking at is taking that full perspective. We're looking at enforcement, prevention, and victim services as a whole. But when I go into Baltimore City and I sit down and I talk to the community, and we talked about this a little bit, I think it's really important to sit down and talk to the people that are the experts. And the people in the community are the experts, in my opinion. What they keep telling me repeatedly is hope. They want hope. And I think that what the governor's bringing, is bringing hope to them by providing services, providing support, and providing programming that will help that city heal. And I think that that's something we need to do.
How long have you been serving in this position?
I've been in here since 2016.
16, so 3 years.
Yep.
What are you most proud of?
I think the thing I'm most proud of is when I sit down and I see a victim service provider sitting next to an enforcement person, sitting next to a prevention person, and talking about what the solution is going to be for a community. And yes, Baltimore is certainly a focus, but everywhere is a focus. Mm-hmm. I mean, we have the same type of issues in Anne Arundel County and Queen Anne's County and Western Maryland. And something that we're very focused on is making sure that just the big seven, so to speak, aren't getting all of the attention, that we're looking in the western part of the state, and we're looking at the eastern part of the state. But when those three disciplines can sit down, enforcement, victim services, and prevention, not always agree, but come out of it with a productive solution, that's what I'm most proud of. What do
you want to have in your arsenal that you don't currently have? What's missing? Because you never have enough money.
Yeah, that's true. I think in terms of the resources, Governor Hogan has made it very, very good for our office to have the resources that we need. I think one of the things that we're continuing to strive for is data. And I had to turn it back to data. Is could we do a better job of sharing information across disciplines, across agencies, so that we can identify those that need help the best that we can and most efficiently.
And that's got to be hard with mental health issues also at play, right?
It certainly is.
So how do you get over that?
So we're looking at different technologies. Technologies change so much. Some of the challenges that we have is we have to be very mindful of privacy and civil liberties with sharing data. But we're looking at ways that we can share data without actually exposing the personally identifying information to those people that shouldn't have it. Almost coming up with unique identifiers so that you don't know it's Glenn Fueston that we're talking about, but it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Mm-hmm. And then share that information across the disciplines, and only the people that are allowed to see the information, the personal identifying information, they can see it.
We know, maybe you don't know, you've got to know, the state's websites are not necessarily the most 2019-ish they could be. You're aware of this.
I've heard.
Is there any hope for the state's websites to get a little more user-friendly in 2020 or 2021?
I certainly think so. As you know, one of the governor's initiatives has been the customer service campaign, and that's a very big issue for the governor. And one of the things that we're looking at is retooling some of these different websites. Matter of fact, if you go to the State Department of Assessments and Taxations, they just did a revamp of their entire website, which is an incredible website now, very user-friendly. And we're looking to do the same thing, because just as you said, we have to be able to get this information out to the public, and it has to be as most efficient as possible.
And I went on your website this morning and couldn't get to several pages, which, not your fault,
no,
but...
Oh, I certainly agree, and I think that one of the challenges that we have there is refocusing, our business process and our vision, and we have to translate that into our website as well, so that people are able to get to the information that they want. One of the things that we're doing to help with that is we're partnering with Maryland Maryland 211. If you're not familiar with them, they're an agency that collects services across the state. They have over 6,000 different services, and we're putting that all into one website where people can go, type in what they're in need of. So it could be assistance with domestic violence, it could be assistance with opioid overdoses or what have you, and it lists all the resources that are available. So we're trying, but you're right, it's a big entity to turn around.
Glenn, thank you very much for your time today.
Oh, thank you very much. This has been great.
This is Donna Cole on the 1430 Connection. We'll see you next week.